Hey everyone, so in this video we want to start talking about a very important topic, and that is forces. And we start with gravity, but I want to use this video to start with a couple of basic things that you have to understand. The first thing is that we will talk a lot about pop forces the next couple of years. And now you might think, well, that doesn't interest me much because they only work with pops, right? Well, you're right and wrong at the same time, because it's true they only work with points, but they're actually super important for everything almost that is coming, because almost every simulation type that we will look at later is actually based on points nowadays. So Vellum, so soft bodies, is actually calculated on the point level. So pop forces are the exact same forces that we use there. Then RBDs, destruction, hard surface geometry, is actually also calculated in form of points. So again, the pop forces will be applied. Even flip simulations, so fluid simulations, are actually calculated with points. So then again, you can and will and have to use pop forces there. There's only one exception to this, and this is Pyro, because Pyro is purely based on volumes. But even there, we will see actually points play a role with that, again, also point forces. So pay attention, everything you learn here in this chapter is super important for everything to come. Now let's start, like we said, with gravity, and let's start with the PopNet so that we don't have to build everything from scratch, and we don't need this one, and we just drop the gravity and we're good. And we should now be able to see, yeah, points fall down, amazing. Now a few things about this. First of all, be aware what force actually means. A force is, and here we can see it, with minus 9.80665, you probably have learned this in school. This is meters per second squared, which means it's an acceleration. And this is important. A force is speeding up points. So it's actually changing the velocity of points. We will talk about this later, but force is not the same as speed. Force is an acceleration that increases the speed. Very important. So keep that in mind. Whenever we talk about forces, we mean acceleration. Another thing that is important, that is a bit counterintuitive, is while it's not super important in the beginning, later on it will play a role, and that is gravity ignores the mass of objects. So this is a bit weird, because in reality we perceive it differently. Because, for example, if you take a small thing and let it fall down, and a big heavy thing and let it fall down with a higher mass, the big massive thing will arrive at the bottom quicker. But this is because of air resistance. You might have heard this before, but this is actually not based on the mass, but on the area of contact with the air. So if you would let both things fall in a vacuum, for example, a feather and a bowling ball, both will actually arrive at the same time. You probably have heard this before, but keep this in mind, that's the same in Houdini, because technically we always work here in a vacuum. There are ways of changing this, we will see this later, but by default that's the case. So while it doesn't tell you that here, the gravity does not care about the mass. Mass later on will actually do the opposite of what we think. The bigger the mass of something, the slower or less strongly it reacts to something. So the opposite would actually be true to what we think in Houdini. The bigger mass will make it move slower actually. And this would be very confusing to us, and this is why it's turned off. And we can actually see this when we look at another force later on, for example the pop force, which we will talk about later. This actually even has this button here, ignore mass, explicitly turned on. So here you can even change this or experiment with this. But just keep in mind, gravity basically also has this checkbox turned on. It just doesn't show it to you. So this is always a thing with gravity, it ignores mass. Hopefully this will make more sense later on. So as you can see, there's not much to actually change here except the acceleration speed, but there is a little bit to understand what's happening behind the curtain, so to say, and this will play a role in the next couple of videos as well. So I hope this is helpful. Thanks very much and see you later. Cheers.